"Mom, please." The crack of her hand across my face cuts off my plea. The sting burns, and I bite down on my lip to keep from crying out. Not in front of her. Never in front of her. "Don't you mom me, Greg," she spits, her eyes wild. "You think you can just do whatever you want, huh? You think you can disrespect me?" I don't respond. I've learned it's better not to. My cheek throbs where she hit me, and I can already feel it swelling. She's panting, her chest heaving with every breath, but then she just walks away, muttering to herself, leaving me standing there like an idiot. I wait until I hear her bedroom door slam shut before I move, every part of me trembling. I want to scream, to break something, but instead, I head for the window. My hands shake as I lift the frame, and the cool night air rushes in, a sharp contrast to the heat burning under my skin. "John," I whisper into the darkness, my voice barely audible. It's our signal, one we've used for years. It takes less than a minute before I see his silhouette climbing over the fence that separates our houses. He's fast, silent. He's done this so many times it's almost second nature. "What happened?" he asks as soon as he's through the window, his eyes immediately scanning my face. "Same old," I mutter, brushing off his concern, but he's already lifting my chin, inspecting the damage. "She hit you again," he states flatly, his voice low. There's no question in it. He knows. He always knows. "Yeah," I admit, trying to pull away, but he holds me there, his thumb brushing gently over the swelling. "Bitch," he mutters under his breath. And for a second, I almost smile. Almost. "Let me get the first aid kit," he says, and before I can protest, he's already rummaging through my desk drawer where I keep it hidden. He pulls out a cold compress and presses it against my cheek. The relief is immediate, and I close my eyes, letting the cold seep into my skin. We sit in silence for a while, the only sound the muffled noise of the TV in the other room. He's gentle, careful, as he tends to my wounds, and I can't help but be grateful. Grateful that he's here, that he cares, that he's not like her. "Thanks," I mumble, opening my eyes to find him watching me. There's something in his gaze, something I can't quite place, but before I can think too much about it, he speaks. "Greg, you don't have to stay here, you know," he says softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "You could come with me, we could go somewhere, anywhere." The offer is tempting, so tempting. But I shake my head. "I can't just leave," I tell him, my voice cracking. "She's still my mom." He doesn't argue, just nods and gives me a small, sad smile. "Yeah, I get it." We sit there for a while longer, the silence stretching between us. It's comfortable, familiar. But there's something else there too, something I can't quite put my finger on. It lingers in the air, thick and heavy, and I can feel it pressing down on me. "John, thanks for coming over," I say, finally breaking the silence. "I don't know what I'd do without you." He smiles, but it doesn't reach his eyes. "You don't have to thank me, Greg. I'm always here for you." And I believe him. I really do. But there's something about the way he says it, something that makes my chest tighten, makes my heart race. "Get some sleep," he says, standing up and heading for the window. But before he climbs out, he pauses, looking back at me with that same unreadable expression. "You know I care about you, right?" "Yeah," I reply, my voice barely a whisper. "I know." And then he's gone, disappearing into the night as quickly as he came, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I lie down, my mind racing, unable to shake the feeling that something is about to change, something big. Sleep doesn't come easy after John leaves. I lie there, staring at the ceiling, the weight of his words pressing down on me. "You know I care about you, right?" It echoes in my mind, making my heart pound for reasons I can't fully understand. Or maybe I just don't want to understand them. At some point, exhaustion wins out, and I drift into a restless sleep. But it doesn't last long. I wake up to a strange sensation, something soft and warm pressing against my lips. My eyes flutter open, and at first I'm disoriented, not sure if I'm dreaming. But then I see him, his face inches from mine, his breath mingling with mine in the dim light of the room. "John," my voice is barely a whisper, more a breath than a word. He freezes, his eyes widening in shock as he realizes I'm awake. For a moment neither of us moves, the world narrowing to just the two of us, our breaths the only sound in the room. My heart is racing, pounding so loudly in my chest I'm sure he can hear it. I'm sorry," he stammers, pulling back quickly, his face flushed. "I didn't mean to, I was just..." But he doesn't finish, and I don't know what to say to fill the silence. My lips still tingle from the contact, and my mind is a whirlwind of confusion. Was that real? Did he just ... kiss me? I thought you were asleep, he continues, his voice trembling. He looks anywhere but at me, his hands fidgeting nervously. I shouldn't have ... I'm sorry, Greg. I didn't mean to freak you out. I sit up, my thoughts a chaotic mess, trying to process what just happened. John, what was that? I finally managed to ask, my voice shaky. He looks at me then, really looks at me, and there's something in his eyes that sends a shiver down my spine. I don't know, he admits, his voice barely above a whisper. I just ... you were there, and I couldn't stop myself. I'm sorry, Greg. I really am. There's a desperation in his voice, a vulnerability I've never seen before, and it makes my chest ache. I should say something, anything to make this less awkward, but I'm too stunned, too confused. What does this mean? What does he mean? Do you ... do you like me? I blurt out before I can stop myself, the words tumbling out in a rush. John flinches, like the question physically hurt him. He doesn't answer right away, just stands there, looking at me with an intensity that makes me want to look away. But I don't. I can't. I don't know, he finally says, his voice so quiet I almost don't hear him. Maybe. Yes, I don't know, Greg. I've been so confused lately. About everything. His words hang in the air, and I can feel my heart pounding in my chest, my breath catching in my throat. This is too much. It's all too much. I should say something, but I'm too scared to open my mouth, too scared of what might come out. I'm sorry, he says again, his voice trembling. I shouldn't have done that. I just ... I care about you, Greg. A lot. And sometimes ... I don't know. Sometimes I think maybe it's more than that. His confession hits me like a punch to the gut, leaving me breathless, and for a moment I can't even think. All I can do is stare at him, my mind reeling with the implications of what he just said. This changes everything. But how? I don't know. John, I start, but the words die in my throat. What am I supposed to say to that? How am I supposed to feel? All I know is that I can't lose him. I can't. It's okay, he says quickly, holding up his hands as if to ward off whatever I'm about to say. You don't have to say anything. I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry. Let's just ... forget it happened, okay? Please. But how can I forget? How can I pretend that this didn't just turn my world upside down? Yet, I find myself nodding, because what else can I do? Okay, I whisper, even though I know it's a lie. I'm never going to forget this. Not ever. He lets out a shaky breath, relief flooding his features, but I can see the pain there too, the uncertainty. I should go, he says, backing towards the window. We'll talk tomorrow, okay? When things aren't so ... weird. I nod again, unable to trust myself to speak. He hesitates for a moment, like he wants to say something more, but then he just gives me a small, sad smile and slips out the window, disappearing into the night. I'm left alone in the darkness, my mind a chaotic mess of emotions I can't even begin to untangle. I press my fingers to my lips, still feeling the ghost of his kiss, and I know nothing will ever be the same again. I barely sleep after John leaves. My mind keeps replaying the moment his lips touched mine, the way his voice trembled when he apologized, the raw vulnerability in his eyes. By the time dawn breaks, I've run through every possible scenario in my head, and none of them make me feel any better. When I finally drag myself out of bed, I'm exhausted, but there's no way I can stay home. Not with Mom prowling around the house like a ticking time bomb. I head to school, the usual dread hanging over me like a cloud, but today there's something else too. Something heavier. John and I usually meet up before class, but today I take a different route, slipping through the side entrance. I can't face him, not yet. My thoughts are too jumbled, my emotions too raw. I need time to figure out what the hell is going on before I talk to him again. But of course, avoiding him is easier said than done. By lunchtime, I'm almost convinced I've managed to dodge him, but then, as I'm heading to my usual spot under the big oak tree, I see him waiting there, hands shoved deep into his pockets, staring at the ground. My heart leaps into my throat, and for a split second, I consider turning around and bolting. But he looks up before I can move, and our eyes lock. There's no escaping now. Hey, he says, his voice cautious, almost like he's afraid of what I'm going to say. Hey, I reply, trying to keep my tone neutral. I can't let him see how much this is messing with me. He gestures to the space beside him, and I hesitate for just a second before sitting down. The silence between us is thick, almost suffocating. This used to be our spot where we'd talk about everything: school, life, the latest movie we watched. But now it feels like there's an invisible wall between us, and I have no idea how to break it down. About last night, John starts, but I cut him off before he can finish. Can we not? I blurt out more harshly than I intended. I just ... not here, okay. He flinches, and guilt twists in my gut. I didn't mean to snap at him. I'm just so overwhelmed, and I don't know how to deal with any of this. Okay, he says quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. He looks away, and I hate myself for making this even more awkward than it already is. We sit in silence for a few minutes, the tension between us growing with every second that passes. I can feel him glancing at me out of the corner of his eye, like he's waiting for me to say something, anything, to make this less unbearable. Finally, I can't take it anymore. Look, John, I'm sorry, I say, my voice softer now. I didn't mean to be an ass. It's just ... this is a lot, you know. He nods, still not looking at me. Yeah, I know, it's a lot for me too. Another silence falls between us, but this time it's less suffocating, more contemplative. I lean back against the tree, closing my eyes, trying to find some semblance of normalcy in this chaos. I don't want things to be weird between us, John says after a while, his voice so soft I almost don't hear him. You're my best friend, Greg. I can't lose that. His words hit me like a punch to the gut, and I open my eyes, turning to look at him. There's a sadness in his expression that makes my chest ache. You're not going to lose me, I say, and I mean it. No matter how confusing this is, I can't imagine my life without John in it. He finally meets my gaze, and I see a flicker of hope in his eyes. So, we're good, he asks, his voice tentative. Yeah, I reply, and this time, I'm the one who forces a smile. We're good. The relief on his face is immediate, and for a moment, things almost feel normal again. Almost. But there's still that underlying tension, the unspoken thing between us that neither of us knows how to address. Do you want to grab a burger after school, he asks, and I can tell he's trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground. Sure, I agree, grateful for the distraction. Your treat. He chuckles, the sound lightening the mood just a little. As if you ever pay. We fall into our usual banter, the rhythm of our friendship returning, but it's not quite the same. There's a shadow hanging over us, a question left unanswered, and I know it's only a matter of time before we have to face it. But for now, we pretend everything's okay, and I let myself believe that maybe it will be. After school, John and I head to the usual burger joint, trying to slip back into the comfort of our routine. The smell of grease and fries fills the air, and for a while it almost feels like old times. We sit in our usual booth by the window, the sunlight casting long shadows across the table. So did you see that new horror movie trailer, John asks as he takes a bite of his burger. His tone is casual, like he's trying to recapture the ease we used to have. Yeah, I reply, matching his tone. Looks creepy as hell. We should check it out this weekend. Definitely, he agrees, and for a moment it feels like everything's okay. Like we're just two normal teenagers planning a weekend hangout. But then his gaze flickers to my face, and I see the concern in his eyes as he notices the bruise still visible on my cheek. Does it hurt, he asks quietly, his voice tinged with worry. It's fine, I say, brushing it off, but I can't hide the way I tense up. I don't want to talk about Mom, not now, not when we're finally getting back to normal. He hesitates, like he wants to push, but then he sighs and takes another bite of his burger. You know I'm here, right, if you ever need to talk? Yeah, I know, I say, trying to keep my tone light, but the truth is, I don't want to talk. Not about her, not about last night. I just want things to be simple again. We finish our meal in relative silence, the conversation drifting into safer topics: school, games, the usual. But there's still that underlying tension, that feeling that we're both dancing around something we don't want to confront. As we leave the diner, I glance at John, and for a moment I see the same uncertainty reflected in his eyes. He opens his mouth like he's about to say something, but then he closes it and just smiles instead. We start walking home, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows on the pavement. It's peaceful, almost calming, but there's a knot of anxiety tightening in my chest that I can't ignore. Greg John suddenly says, breaking the silence. There's something in his tone that makes me stop in my tracks. I turn to look at him and he's standing there, his expression conflicted. Yeah, I say, trying to keep my voice steady. I've been thinking, he starts, rubbing the back of his neck nervously. About last night. I don't want things to be weird between us, but I also don't want to pretend like it didn't happen. The knot in my chest tightens and I feel my pulse quicken. John, I begin, but he cuts me off. Let me finish, he says, his voice firm but not unkind. I don't know what that kiss meant, Greg. I don't know if it was just a mistake or if it's something more. But what I do know is that I care about you, more than I've ever cared about anyone else, and I don't want to keep lying to myself or to you. His words hang in the air, and I can feel my heart pounding in my chest. This is the moment I've been dreading, the moment when everything changes, but I can't run from it, not anymore. I care about you too, I admit, my voice barely above a whisper. But I'm scared, John. I don't know what any of this means. He steps closer, his eyes searching mine. We don't have to figure it all out right now, he says softly, but we can't keep avoiding it either. We need to talk about it, even if it's just to say we don't know what's going on. I nod, my throat tight. Okay, let's talk. But before either of us can say anything more, we hear footsteps approaching. I glance over John's shoulder and see a group of guys from school heading our way. My stomach drops as I recognize them, Jake, Mike, and their crew. They're not exactly known for being friendly, especially towards people like me. Hey, look who it is, Jake calls out, a smirk spreading across his face as they approach. If it isn't the fags. John's entire posture shifts, tensing up as he steps in front of me, trying to shield me from what's coming. But I know it's too late. We're caught. Leave us alone, Jake John says, his voice steady but with an edge I've rarely heard before. Or what, Mike sneers, stepping closer. What are you going to do, Johnny? Kiss him in front of us. The words hit like a slap, and I can feel the blood drain from my face. I want to say something, to defend myself, but my voice is stuck in my throat. Just walk away, John says, his voice low, dangerous. But they don't. They never do. Before I know what's happening, Jake shoves John, sending him stumbling back. What, you think you're tough now, just because you're sucking face with your boyfriend? Anger flares in my chest, hot and overwhelming. Back off, Jake, I snap, finding my voice. Just leave us the hell alone. Jake's eyes narrow, and I can see the anger in them. He's spoiling for a fight, and I know we're not going to get out of this unscathed. You think you're so tough, Jake spits, shoving me this time. You're nothing but a freak. John's back at my side in an instant, his fists clenched, ready to defend me. But I can see the fear in his eyes too, the fear that this is going to get ugly. And just like that, the fragile sense of normalcy we've been clinging to shatters, leaving us standing on the brink of something we're not ready to face. Jake's shove catches me off balance and I stumble back, my mind racing as I try to figure out how to diffuse the situation. My pulse is thundering in my ears, and every instinct screams at me to run. But with John standing beside me, fists clenched, I know running isn't an option, not without making things worse. Back off, Jake John says again, his voice firm, but I can hear the undercurrent of fear. He's outnumbered, and we both know it. Jake just laughs, the sound harsh and grating. Or what? You gonna cry about it, Greg? Run home to mommy, the taunt hits deep, and he knows it. Just leave us alone, I manage, trying to keep my voice steady, but it wavers. I'm terrified, and they can smell it. Mike steps up beside Jake, his sneer growing. You hear that, Jake? They just want to be left alone. Maybe they want to go back to their little love nest and finish what they started. I glance at John, who's still standing firm, but I can see the conflict in his eyes. He wants to protect me, but he knows as well as I do that this is a fight we can't win. Why don't you just walk away, I suggest, trying to sound brave, but it comes out more like a plea. You've made your point. Jake's smirk widens and he takes another step forward, closing the distance between us. And what point is that, Greg? That you're a little queer who can't keep his hands off his boyfriend. Before I can react, he shoves me again, harder this time, and I slam into John. The impact knocks the wind out of me, and for a second, I'm too stunned to move. But John isn't. He catches me, his arms wrapping around me to steady me, and in that moment, something snaps. I see the fear in his eyes turn into something else, something harder, more dangerous. Enough, John's voice rings out, louder and sharper than I've ever heard it. He shoves me behind him, stepping right up to Jake, his face inches from his. You want to pick a fight? Fine. But you're going to regret it. Jake hesitates, just for a moment, and I can see the doubt flicker across his face. He wasn't expecting this, wasn't expecting John to push back. But then the bravado returns, and he squares his shoulders. Oh yeah? What are you going to do about it? Johnny Jake sneers. But there's less conviction in his voice now. John doesn't flinch. He's trembling, but he doesn't back down. Try me, he growls, and for a moment, it's like everyone's holding their breath, waiting to see what's going to happen next. But then, out of nowhere, Mike grabs John by the shoulder, trying to pull him back, and all hell breaks loose. John spins around, his fist flying, catching Mike across the jaw with a solid punch. The sound of it echoes in the air, a dull thud that snaps everyone out of their shock. Jake lunges forward, fists swinging, and suddenly it's a full-on brawl. I'm shoved to the side, scrambling to stay on my feet as the chaos erupts around me. I can hear the grunts and curses, the dull thud of fists against flesh, and I know I need to do something, anything to help John. But I'm frozen, paralyzed by the fear coursing through me. I can't move, can't think, can't even breathe. All I can do is watch as John fights, outnumbered and overwhelmed, but refusing to back down. Then, through the haze of panic, I see Jake pull back, his fist clenched, aiming a vicious punch at John's head. Time slows down, and everything in me screams to move, to do something, but I'm too late. The punch connects, and John crumples, collapsing to the ground with a sickening thud. John, I finally find my voice, rushing forward, but I'm shoved back by one of the other guys, his face twisted in anger. Stay out of it, Greg, he snaps, his voice dripping with contempt. But I can't just stand by. Not this time. Summoning every ounce of courage I have left, I shove him aside and drop to my knees beside John. He's conscious, but barely, his face bloodied, his breathing labored. John, we have to get out of here, I whisper urgently, trying to pull him up, but he's too dazed to move. Look at the lovebirds, Jake sneers, but there's something different in his tone now, a hint of satisfaction. He's done what he came to do, and the fight's gone out of him. Next time, stay out of our way. With that, he and his crew turn and walk off, leaving us battered and bruised in the middle of the empty street. I don't even have the energy to shout after them. All I care about is John. Come on, we need to get you home, I say, my voice trembling as I help him to his feet. He winces, but he doesn't complain, leaning heavily on me as we start to make our way back. As we limp home, the adrenaline starts to wear off, and the pain sets in, both physical and emotional. I can't stop replaying the fight in my mind, the way John stood up for me, the way I froze. The guilt gnaws at me, even as I know we just barely made it out of that mess. When we finally reach his house, I help him inside, guiding him to the couch. He's hurt, worse than he lets on, and I can see the exhaustion in his eyes as he leans back, closing them for a moment. John, I say softly, kneeling beside him. I'm so sorry. He opens his eyes, and for the first time since the fight, he smiles, a small, tired smile, but a smile nonetheless. Don't be, he murmurs. I'd do it all again if it meant keeping you safe. His words hit me harder than any punch, and I feel tears prick at the corners of my eyes. I reach out, taking his hand in mine, holding it tightly. I don't know what I'd do without you, I whisper, my voice breaking. You'll never have to find out, he replies, squeezing my hand gently. We're in this together, Greg, no matter what. And in that moment, despite everything, I believe him. But I also know that what happened today is just the beginning. The world isn't going to leave us alone, and sooner or later, we're going to have to face it head on. But as long as we have each other, I know we'll find a way to survive. The next day, John isn't at school. I'm not surprised he took a real beating yesterday, and I'm sure he needs time to recover. But knowing that doesn't stop the worry gnawing at me all day. Every class drags on, the minutes ticking by, as I replay the fight over and over in my head, haunted by the image of John crumpling to the ground. I send him a text during lunch, just to check in. Me, hey, you okay? I stare at my phone, waiting for the 3 little dots that signal he's typing back, but they never come. By the time the final bell rings, my anxiety has reached a fever pitch. I grab my stuff and practically sprint to his house, ignoring the stares and whispers from classmates who probably heard about what happened. When I get to John's house, I don't even bother knocking. I know his parents are out, his dad works late, and his mom's often out running errands, so I let myself in with the spare key he gave me years ago. The house is quiet, eerily so, and I feel my heart rate pick up as I head to his room. I find him lying on his bed, one arm draped over his eyes, his other hand resting on his stomach. His face is a mess of bruises, one eye swollen nearly shut, and there's a bandage on his temple. Seeing him like this makes my chest tighten with guilt and anger, but I push those feelings aside as I quietly close the door behind me. "John," I call softly, not wanting to startle him. He shifts, pulling his arm away and blinking up at me with his good eye. "Greg," he says, his voice hoarse. He tries to sit up, but winces and falls back against the pillows. "Don't," I say quickly, rushing to his side. "Just lie still. You need to rest." He gives me a weak smile. "I'm fine," he insists, but even as he says it, I can see the pain etched on his face. I pull a chair up next to his bed and sit down, my gaze never leaving his. "You don't look fine," I counter, my voice tight with worry. "Why didn't you text me back?" He shrugs, looking away. "Didn't feel like talking." His words sting, but I push past it. "I was worried, John. I still am." He sighs, and I can see the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers twitch against the blanket. "I'm sorry," he murmurs, and I know he means it, but it doesn't erase the distance I feel between us now. It's like a wall has gone up, one that wasn't there before, and I don't know how to break it down. "John, talk to me," I say, leaning forward, my voice soft but insistent. "Please, I can't help you if you shut me out." He finally looks at me, and there's something in his eyes, something dark, something that scares me. "I don't need help, Greg," he says quietly. "Not anymore. Not after yesterday." The words hang in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. I feel a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean?" I ask, my voice trembling slightly. John's gaze drifts away again, staring at the ceiling. I realize something. I can't protect you. Not the way I want to. I tried yesterday and look where it got us." His words cut deep, and I shake my head, reaching out to take his hand in mine. "You did protect me," I insist, squeezing his hand. "You stood up to them, John. You didn't let them win." He lets out a bitter laugh, but there's no humor in it, didn't I? "They got what they wanted, Greg. They wanted to hurt us, and they did." I don't know what to say to that. He's right, in a way. But it doesn't make me feel any less helpless, any less desperate to fix this. "We'll figure this out," I say finally, my voice firmer than I feel. "We'll get through this together." John doesn't respond right away, and the silence between us feels like a gaping chasm. When he finally speaks, his voice is barely a whisper. "What if we can't? What if this is just the beginning?" I swallow hard, fear gnawing at my insides, but I force myself to meet his gaze, to let him see the determination in my eyes. "Then we'll face it together," I say, my voice steady. "Whatever comes next, we'll handle it. I'm not going anywhere, John." He looks at me for a long moment, and I can see the conflict in his eyes, the fear, the doubt. But then, slowly, he nods. "Okay," he whispers, his voice so quiet I almost don't hear it. "Okay." I don't know if he believes me, if he really thinks we can survive this. But as I sit there, holding his hand, I know one thing for sure: I'll do whatever it takes to protect him, just like he's always protected me. And as we sit in the silence of his room, the world outside feels a little less daunting. At least for now. The days blur together after that, each one feeling like a slow march through a thick fog. John and I go back to school, but things aren't the same. There's an unspoken tension between us, a weight that wasn't there before. We still hang out, still talk, but it's different. There's a layer of something unsaid between us, something we're both too afraid to confront. It doesn't help that Jake and his crew are everywhere. Every time I see them in the hallway, my stomach twists into knots. They don't say much, just smirks and sneers, but it's enough to keep me on edge, always looking over my shoulder. John seems to sense it too. He's more protective now, always making sure we stick together, but there's a distance in his eyes that wasn't there before. It's like he's building walls around himself, and no matter how hard I try, I can't break through. One afternoon, about a week after the fight, we're in my room, pretending to study. John's sprawled out on my bed, flipping through a textbook, but I can tell he's not really reading. I'm at my desk, trying to focus on the math problems in front of me, but my mind keeps wandering back to that day, to the look on John's face when he said he couldn't protect me. "Greg," John says, suddenly breaking the silence. I look up, and he's sitting up now, his eyes fixed on me in that intense way that always makes my heart skip a beat. "Yeah," I reply, trying to sound casual, but there's an edge of anticipation in my voice. He hesitates, like he's searching for the right words, then sighs and runs a hand through his hair. "Do you you ever think about what happened? I mean, really think about it." The question catches me off guard, and I feel my heart start to race. "What do you mean?" I ask, even though I know exactly what he's talking about. John's eyes don't leave mine, and I can see the conflict there, the uncertainty. That kiss, he says quietly. I can't stop thinking about it. My breath catches in my throat, and for a moment I'm back in that moment, the feel of his lips on mine, the way everything seemed to shift between us in an instant. I've been trying to push it out of my mind, to pretend like it didn't happen, but now, hearing him bring it up, it's like a dam breaks inside me. "Yeah," I admit, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking about it too." He looks relieved, but there's still that tension, that nervous energy hanging between us. "I don't know what it means, Greg," he continues, his voice shaking slightly. "I don't know if it's just ... I don't know if I'm just confused, or if it's something more." The room feels smaller, the air thicker, and I can feel my pulse in my ears. "John," I say slowly, carefully, "we don't have to figure it all out right now. Maybe it's okay to not know." He nods, but I can see he's not satisfied with that answer. I need to know where we stand, Greg. I need to know if this is something we should try to figure out, or if it's something we should just forget about. I can feel the weight of his words pressing down on me, and I know this is the moment where everything could change again. But instead of feeling scared, I feel calm, like this is something we were always going to have to face. "Maybe we should stop avoiding it," I suggest, my voice steadier than I feel. "Maybe we should. I don't know. See where it goes." John's eyes widen slightly, and for a moment I think he's going to pull back, to retreat behind those walls he's been building. But then, slowly, he nods. "Yeah," he says softly. "Yeah, I think we should." The words hang between us, and I can feel something shifting, something new and uncertain but not unwelcome. I stand up from my desk and walk over to the bed, sitting down next to him. The tension is still there, but it's different now, charged, electric. John looks at me, and there's a question in his eyes, one I've seen before but never understood until now. "Are you sure?" he asks, his voice barely above a whisper. I nod, feeling a strange mix of fear and excitement. "Yeah," I reply, my voice trembling just a bit. "I'm sure." He reaches out, hesitating for just a moment before his hand finds mine, and the contact sends a jolt through me. We sit there holding hands, neither of us saying a word, just letting the moment stretch out between us. Finally, John breaks the silence. "So what now?" I smile, a real smile this time, and squeeze his hand gently. "We figure it out together," I say, and for the first time in a long time I feel like maybe, just maybe, everything's going to be okay. We don't kiss, not this time, but the unspoken understanding between us feels like a promise to take things one step at a time, to explore whatever this is without rushing or forcing it. And as we sit there, hand in hand, I realize that maybe, just maybe, we found something worth fighting for after all. The days that follow are a strange mix of tension and relief. John and I continue to hang out like we always have, but now there's an undercurrent of something more, something neither of us is quite ready to name, but we both feel it. It's like we've crossed a line and there's no going back, but we're still figuring out what that means. We've decided not to rush into anything, to take things slow. But even with that decision, the weight of what we're doing, of what we're becoming, hangs heavy over us. It's not just about us anymore, it's about how this will change everything, how it will be seen by others, how it could make everything so much harder. One afternoon, about a week after our talk, we're at the park, sitting on a bench near the lake. It's one of our favorite spots, a place we used to go to just escape, to clear our heads. Today, though, the usual calm of the place feels off, like there's a storm brewing on the horizon. I've been thinking, John says suddenly, his voice breaking through the comfortable silence. I turn to look at him, my heart skipping a beat. About what? About us, he replies, his gaze fixed on the water. About what this means. I know we said we'd take it slow, but I don't think we can keep pretending like nothing's changed. He's right, of course. Every time I look at him now, I feel that shift, that pull towards something more. But it's scary, terrifying even. The idea of stepping into something so unknown, something that could change everything. I know, I say, trying to keep my voice steady. But what do we do? It's not like we can just, I don't know, come out and announce it to everyone. You saw what happened last time they even suspected. John winces, the memory of the fight still fresh for both of us. I don't want to hide, Greg, he says, his voice low but firm. I don't want to pretend like I don't care about you, but I also don't want to get us hurt. I can hear the conflict in his voice, and it mirrors the one raging inside me. We don't have to figure it all out right now, I suggest, echoing the words I've said before. But this time, they feel hollow, like a band-aid over a wound that's too deep to heal so easily. John shakes his head, frustration clear on his face. I know, but it's like, every time I'm around you, I want more. And I hate that I'm scared to have it. I don't know what to say to that. I feel the same way, but I'm too afraid to admit it. Instead, I just reach out and take his hand, our fingers lacing together. It's a small gesture, but it feels like the only thing grounding me in this moment. What if we just try, John says after a long pause, his voice hesitant. What if we stop worrying about what could go wrong and just see what happens? The idea sends a rush of fear through me, but also a spark of excitement. You mean like actually be together? For real? He nods, finally turning to meet my gaze. Yeah, I don't want to hide anymore, Greg, but I also don't want to push you into something you're not ready for. I take a deep breath, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. But then I remember all the times John has been there for me, the way he's always stood by my side no matter what. And I realize that maybe this is something I'm ready for, something I've been ready for, even if I didn't know it. I'm scared too, I admit, my voice barely above a whisper. But I want to try. I don't want to keep pretending either. John's face softens, and he squeezes my hand, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Okay, he says softly, we'll try. Together. It feels like a huge weight has been lifted, but at the same time, a new kind of tension settles in its place. We've made the decision, but now we have to live with it, and that's even scarier. As we sit there, hand in hand, I glance around the park, half expecting someone to jump out and confront us, to call us out. But there's no one, just the quiet rustle of the trees and the gentle ripple of the water. Do you think they'll accept it, I ask, my voice filled with doubt. Our friends, everyone at school. John's expression darkens, and I can see the worry in his eyes. I don't know, he admits. Some of them might, but others. We've seen how it can be. I nod, the reality of our situation settling in. It's not just about us, it's about how the world will see us, how it will try to tear us apart. But I also know that this is something I can't walk away from. Not now. We'll figure it out, I say, trying to sound more confident than I feel. One step at a time. John smiles, but it's tinged with that same uncertainty I feel. Yeah, he agrees. One step at a time. As we sit there, the sun beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the park, I realize that we've crossed another line. There's no going back now, no more pretending or hiding. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. But as I look at John, I can't help but wonder if we're truly ready for what lies ahead. It doesn't take long for people to notice the change between John and me. It starts small whispers in the hallway, sideways glances from classmates who are too curious for their own good. But like all things in high school, it snowballs quickly, turning into something we can't control. By the end of the week, the rumors are everywhere. I can feel them buzzing around us like flies, too many to swat away. Everywhere I go, I can hear the murmur of voices just low enough to pretend they're not talking about me, but I know they are. Did you hear about Greg and John? Someone said they saw them holding hands. No way. They're just friends, right? The words sting. But what hurts more is the way people start looking at us. Like we're different. Like we're not just Greg and John anymore, but something else, something they don't understand and don't want to. John and I try to keep our heads down, but it's impossible to ignore the way the atmosphere around us has shifted. Every time we're together, I can feel eyes on us, judging, questioning. It makes every little interaction feel loaded, like there's a spotlight on us, even when we're just walking to class. One day, as we're sitting in the cafeteria, trying to eat lunch like everything's normal, I notice a group of kids at the next table staring at us, whispering. My stomach churns, and I shove my sandwich away, suddenly not hungry. John notices, his eyes flicking between me and the group. Ignore them, he mutters, his voice tight. I'm trying, I say, my voice low, but I can't keep the frustration out of it. But it's like everywhere we go, people are talking. Let them talk, John says, but I can hear the edge in his voice too. They don't know anything. I want to believe him, but the truth is, it's getting harder to ignore. The rumors are getting bolder, more vicious. I've heard them in the locker room, in the bathrooms, even from people who don't know us at all. It's like our entire relationship or whatever this is has been put under a microscope for everyone to dissect. As we leave the cafeteria, I can feel the weight of those stares pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. John is by my side, but even his presence doesn't ease the tension knotting in my chest. Why can't they just leave us alone, I ask, more to myself than to John, but he hears me anyway. They will, he says, but there's a note of uncertainty in his voice that wasn't there before. Once they find something else to gossip about. But we both know that's not true. This isn't going to blow over. It's only going to get worse. Later that day, as we're heading out to the parking lot, we run into Jake and his crew. My stomach drops as soon as I see them, and I instinctively step closer to John, who immediately tenses up. Well, if it isn't the lovebirds, Jake sneers, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Heard you two are getting real cozy these days. I can feel the blood drain from my face, but I try to keep my voice steady. Back off, Jake. Or what he challenges, taking a step closer. You gonna sick your boyfriend on me? John's hand clenches into a fist at his side, but he doesn't move. Leave it, Jake, he says, his voice cold and controlled. You don't want to do this. Jake just laughs, a harsh, grating sound that echoes in the empty parking lot. Do what? I'm just stating the obvious. Everyone's talking about you two. Can't say I'm surprised. My heart is pounding in my chest, and I can feel the anger bubbling up inside me. But more than that, there's fear of what Jake will say next, fear of what he might do. John takes a deep breath, his jaw tight. We're not going to fight you, Jake. We're not giving you what you want. Jake's eyes narrow, and for a moment I think he's going to push it, going to escalate things again. But then he just sneers and shakes his head. Whatever, just don't start crying when everyone turns on you. It's a tough world out there, boys. With that, he turns and walks away, his crew following him, leaving John and me standing there, the tension still crackling in the air. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding and turned to John, who's staring after them, his expression unreadable. Are you okay, I ask, my voice barely above a whisper. John nods, but he doesn't look at me. Yeah, he says, but it's clear that the encounter has rattled him too. We need to be careful, Greg. It's not going to be easy. I know, I reply, the weight of the situation pressing down on me, but we can handle it, right? He finally looks at me, and there's a flicker of determination in his eyes. Yeah, we can handle it. But even as he says the words, I can't shake the feeling that this is just the beginning, that the real challenges are still ahead of us, and we're not prepared for what's coming. As we walk to the car, I can feel the cracks starting to form in the fragile sense of security we've been trying to build. The rumors, the whispers, the stares, it's all starting to take its toll, and I don't know how much longer we can keep pretending that everything's okay. The tension has been building for days, a pressure cooker ready to explode, and I can feel it in every interaction, every sideways glance, every whispered conversation that stops the moment I walk into a room. John and I have been holding on, pretending that we're fine, that we can handle it. But deep down, I know we're both cracking under the weight of it all. It all comes to a head on Friday afternoon. We're walking out of school, and it's been another day of dodging stares and trying to ignore the snide comments thrown our way. John's been quiet all day, more so than usual, and it's making me nervous. There's a storm brewing inside him, and I'm scared of what will happen when it finally breaks. We make it to the parking lot, and I'm about to suggest we head to the park, somewhere to clear our heads, when I see them. Jake and his crew, leaning against his car, waiting. My stomach twists into a knot, and I can feel the blood drain from my face. John sees them too, and I watch as his expression hardens, his jaw clenching. He stops walking, and I do too, the distance between us and them suddenly feeling like a chasm. "Just keep walking," I whisper, my voice trembling. "Let's just get out of here." But John doesn't move. His fists are clenched at his sides, his whole body tense, like he's ready to spring. I can see the anger simmering just below the surface, barely contained. "John," I say, more urgently now, "don't. It's not worth it." But it's too late. Jake sees the look on John's face, and he smirks, pushing off the car and sauntering over to us. The rest of his crew follows like vultures circling a dying animal. Well, Jake drawls, stopping a few feet in front of us. "If it isn't the lovebirds. How's your little romance going? Heard the whole school's talking about it." I can feel John's tension radiating off him, and I know this isn't going to end well. I step closer to him, trying to be the voice of reason. "Let's just go, John. We don't need to do this." But Jake isn't done. He steps closer, his smirk widening. "What's the matter, Johnny? Got nothing to say? Or are you too busy dreaming about your boyfriend here?" That's the final straw. Something inside John snaps, and before I can stop him, he lunges at Jake, shoving him hard. Jake stumbles back, caught off guard, but he recovers quickly, his smirk turning into a snarl. "Oh, you want to fight, huh?" Jake taunts, squaring up. "Let's see what you've got, tough guy." The next few moments are a blur. John throws a punch, and then everything erupts into chaos. Jake's crew jumps in, and suddenly it's an all-out brawl. I'm shoved to the side, my voice drowned out by the shouts and the sickening thud of fists connecting with flesh. "John, stop," I yell, but he's too far gone, too caught up in the fury that's been building inside him for weeks. He's fighting like a man possessed, like he's trying to exorcise all the pain and anger that's been festering inside him. I try to push through the crowd to get to him, but I'm shoved back again, and all I can do is watch in horror as the fight spirals out of control. Blood is spilled, and I can see John taking hit after hit, but he doesn't back down. He just keeps fighting, driven by something dark and desperate. Finally, a teacher's voice cuts through the chaos, yelling for everyone to break it up. The crowd starts to scatter, and I see John stumble back, blood dripping from his nose, his face bruised and battered. Jake's not much better off, but he's still standing, still smirking like he's won something. John sways on his feet, and I rush to his side, grabbing his arm to steady him. "John, are you okay?" I ask, my voice frantic. He doesn't answer, just stares at the ground, breathing heavily. I can see the anger still burning in his eyes, but it's mixed with something else now, something like shame. "Let's get out of here," I urge, trying to pull him away, but he shakes me off. "I'm fine," he mutters, his voice rough. "Just give me a minute." I step back, my heart pounding in my chest as I watch him struggle to regain control. The teacher reaches us, and there's a flurry of questions, threats of detention, and the promise of calls to our parents. But all I can focus on is John, on the way he won't meet my eyes, the way his hands are still trembling. Eventually the crowd disperses, and we're left alone in the parking lot, the sun dipping low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the pavement. John finally looks at me, and I can see the defeat in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he says, his voice hollow. I didn't mean for it to go that far." I shake my head, tears pricking at my eyes. "It's not your fault, John. They pushed you. They've been pushing us for weeks." But he just shakes his head, his expression tortured. "No, Greg, I should have been stronger. I should have. I don't know. I'm tired, man. I'm so tired of fighting." His words hit me like a punch to the gut, and I realize just how much this has been eating away at him, how much it's been eating away at both of us. We've been trying so hard to hold it together, to pretend like we're okay, but the truth is, we're not. I step closer, reaching out to take his hand. "You don't have to do this alone, John. We'll get through this. But we have to be smart about it. We can't let them win." He looks at me, and for a moment I see the vulnerability he's been hiding for so long. Then he squeezes my hand, nodding slowly. "Yeah," he whispers, "we'll get through this. Together." But as we walk away from the scene, I can't shake the feeling that something's changed, that we've crossed another line and there's no going back. The fight might be over, but the battle is just beginning, and I'm not sure we're ready for what's coming next.